In January of 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, and so began one of the darkest chapters in modern history. By the time World War II broke out in 1939, mass killings of those the Nazis considered enemies of the state had begun. A special campaign was waged against the Jews. They were forced into ghettos, labor camps, and ultimately death camps. And when it was over, in 1945, 11 million human beings had been exterminated. 6 million were Jewish men, women, and children, 2/3 of the European Jewish population. This genocide is known as the Holocaust, or in Hebrew, the Shoah. While we were making the film Schindler's List in Poland, none of us could have predicted the impact it would have on everyone who saw it. But maybe we should have.
How did you survive?
By miracle.
By miracle?
Yes.
Every time Holocaust survivors visited the set and told us about their experiences, we were moved. We realized that each was unique, each was compelling, and each was an important piece of history. The vision to record as many survivor testimonies as possible, and the dream to make them accessible for education, evolved from Steven Spielberg's experiences on making Schindler's List.
There is a saying in Jews, if you rescue one soul, you rescue the whole. You understand? The whole world. Mm-hmm. And this is my opinion.
And so, the survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation was born to record and preserve tens of thousands of Holocaust survivor testimonies for future generations. For the first time in history, we'll be able to navigate through thousands of hours of eyewitness accounts. Groundbreaking computer technology will enable people of all ages around the world to interact with the past like never before.
You know, what does one do in a new country? You gotta learn the language first.
Because most Holocaust survivors are in their 70s and 80s, the foundation is in a race against time. A dedicated team of historians, filmmakers, educators, archivists, and computer technologists have come together to realize this ambitious goal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start at the beginning, in the Foundation's Department of Research and Training. The research department works tirelessly to locate survivors through community outreach programs and through existing Holocaust organizations. In an effort to build a team of highly qualified interviewers, the research staff conducts comprehensive training sessions in every region of the world.
What we're doing by doing these kinds of interviews is collecting the source, the material that historians use to recreate our past.
What we have learned from in preparing the training and from at the beginning of the project, that there are many different types of interviews. There is a therapeutic interview, a journalistic interview, a historical interview, and we have tried to take the best from each of those.
A
woman that I interviewed was sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and she was in charge of sorting and stacking clothes that had been brought back from people who were already gassed. She described how she was sorting through the clothes, and she found a little photo album that she had given her one sister before they left home. And she found it in the clothes, and of course that's when she knew that her own sisters had been sent to the gas chambers. And she kept the little photo album in her shoe for the entire time that she was in the camps, and she was able to save it until after the war.
Survivors of the Shoah, may they help you?
The Foundation relies heavily on a dedicated core of volunteers, many of whom are survivors themselves.
Then I pick up the phone, I can hear instantly who's at the other end. I don't mean man, woman. I mean, is it a survivor? Is it a child of a survivor, second generation, third generation sometimes, grandchildren? Is it somebody who wants to volunteer, somebody who has heard of somebody who's somebody? And then sometimes it comes with, the story starts coming out.
All my family was wiped out. Uncles, cousins, grandparents, all of them, I'm the only one.
On any given day, the Foundation's worldwide regional offices are a hotbed of activity. The regional coordinators are responsible for scheduling and booking the interviewers and camera crews.
On a day-to-day basis, what we're responsible for is coordinating all the interviews. And these people have contacted the 1-800 line. They've either read about our project, their sons and daughters, their grandchildren may have called in, saying that they want their parents and grandparents giving testimony. And we tell them that we want to come to their home, we want to know about their life before, during, and after the war. So the interviewer has to be really somebody that's caring, that's open. There's definitely a matchmaking process.
It should be no surprise that the logistical challenges of international production are tremendous. The production department, on a day-to-day basis, plans and implements interviews around the clock in over 30 languages.
A year ago, there was just a few people here, and we were just dreaming about this, and it's happening, and I get a chill. I just go, and that to me is amazing, that we are really international, that our outreach is global, and that we're bringing these people together.
The survivors in Russia are very poor. They're very lost. They suffered after the war. They went to camps, to gulags, and to jail because they applied for visas to go to Israel. So it's not very pleasant.
There was a gentleman who called me after his testimony, and he said, "I've never spoken of my experiences before. My parents were killed at Auschwitz over 50 years ago, and this allowed me to give them the proper burial that they deserved because I wasn't there when they died." And he was so gracious, and he was so thankful, and I'm sure that he's able to have better sleep at night now.
Once an interview is completed, the original tapes are immediately shipped to the Los Angeles headquarters, where they're carefully checked in and added to the archive.
It was a life full of nightmares. A Jew couldn't make a living no more. A Jew couldn't go out on the street no more. They dislocated you. They beat you up. It was just impossible. I grew up with every time my father went out or my mother went someplace or something, till they came back. I mean, it was just shiver and shake.
The cataloging department is where history meets technology. Every interview is carefully watched by a team of catalogers, each with extensive historical knowledge. Especially designed computer programs enable them to index the content of every interview. This system will allow people to locate testimony about any specific topic mentioned by the survivors.
The cataloging is done with the most up-to-date library science methods. At the same time, the Library of Congress and some of the traditional methods aren't enough, so we have to develop also Holocaust-specific cataloging and indexing. So it's a kind of a marriage between technology, library science, and history.
Ich hab dich so viel lieb, soll's sein auf mir gebeis. Aha, ja Heimat heißt, ich hab dich lieb. I love you so.
Once the testimonies are collected, the Foundation will make them accessible for education in a variety of ways: documentaries, CD-ROM programs, and books. But the most groundbreaking means of distribution and the backbone of the archive will be the online access. Computers such as these will be housed in museums, universities, and Holocaust organizations throughout the world, providing access to the entire archive of testimonies.
This is what we, I guess, could call technically the user interface, but in a way this is what makes this technology, perhaps for the first time, emotional.
Well, it's the faces.
Every face you see is a life.
Yes.
And fortunately, in the case of survivors of the Shoah, these were lives that were spared from the Holocaust and lived to tell us about what happened to them. After they give testimony, 2 to 5 hours of testimony, they bring their families into their homes, and we photograph their families and all the generations that exist today because of their existence. And to really show that, you know, indeed, you know, if you save one life, you do save the world.
And the vacuum that exists because of those that perished.
And all those that perished, you know, who could have survived to have found the cure for cancer, the cure for AIDS? You throw away science, you throw away medicine, you throw away the future. And we're trying to recover some of that, and we're trying to make people learn about why this must never, and even in microcosm, ever happen again. So we move through this this world of faces yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So what we have here is all the names of all the survivors. There will eventually be, in the first 3 years, 50,000 testimonies rescued from the 300,000 survivors that still exist today. But in 10 years' time, there will not be that many survivors. So it's a race against time to get as many survivors to testify on videotape as possible. So with every name, you'll see a picture and a small little summary of who they are. So I can type in a name, Henry Rossmann.
People who would teach, Hitler kids. When I was liberated, I was 19 and a half.
And what this essentially is Henry has just given 2 to 5 hours of testimony about what happened to him in the Holocaust. Before the Holocaust, what was his life like? What was the life like during it? Who did he lose? Who survived?
You put 5.5 years back into your life and try to catch up.
Let's talk about his wife. Janet talks about their meeting. Tap on that, and I can press play.
Then I was thinking about him in concentration camp, but I didn't know nothing if we ever meet together, but it's a fate done, and we're together.
He plays the harmonica, which is why he survived. This saved his life. When the survivors are speaking, almost like a online living documentary, automatically maps and pictures of themselves and actual photographs, documentary movies of the ghettos they were in, the forced labor camps they were in, will automatically be triggered by what they're saying, and at appropriate moments will scroll on. So you're looking at almost a living document you are watching a living document of one's experience in the Holocaust. I really feel that this needs to be taught in schools. I think the lessons of tolerance, the subject of racial hatred, which encompasses the Holocaust as well as black slavery, what our country did to the Native Americans, these are all stories really are about hatred and intolerance in various forms. And I thought that my next duty and pleasure was to find a way to take all the survivors who had come to me and said, please tell my story. Not to so much cast another actor to play them, but let them be themselves and find a way to document their truth. And then how can we share those experiences with everybody who either wants to learn about them voluntarily or through the school systems in this country and around the world must learn about what happened to them.
You know, it's a life. You know, you get to see someone who's talking about their experiences and what they've been through. It's like it impacts you even more than a book would.
This doesn't just affect one group of people, but affects everybody, we as human beings, and all over the world, not just Americans, not just Europeans, not just Africans, Asians, but, you know, we're all in this together.
We take life for granted, and they went through so much, and they appreciate life, and some of us who have everything in life aren't able to appreciate it, and it's, I don't know, it just made me value life more.
Schindler's List was just a little stone which started a big avalanche, which is called Shoah, Testimonies of the Shoah. And I'm definitely sure nobody can stop it anymore.
People have to learn that there's no difference between other people. Whether it's their color, whether it's their religion, it doesn't matter. We're all the same. And we're all basically here for the same purpose, the same reason. And that's to live, let live, and enjoy life. And it's so easy to fall into this cataclysmic chasm of hate. And I think education is the cure.
As we pass into the 21st century, the world, particularly Europe, will inherit an undigestible piece of history, Shoah, which cannot be understood, may not be forgiven, and must not be forgotten. The only gift to the spirits of the dead and the remaining survivors is to say in all grief and in all anger, this did happen.
For more information, please call 1-800-661-2092 in the United States and Canada, or internationally 818-777-7802. Or write to Post Office Box 3168, Los Angeles, California 90078.
Good evening. What you are about to see are the remarkable personal stories of people who survived one of the most terrible periods in history. The Holocaust is an event that still defies understanding. Though 50 years have passed, it's a story that must be told again and again. Chrysler Corporation is proud to be a part of bringing you the incredible and moving stories you are about to hear. They remind us how precious life is, how invaluable our freedoms are, and how important it is to hear the stories from the past to help prevent these atrocities from ever happening again. Listen now as the survivors tell their stories.
Jewish life was like anywhere else in Europe. The people were mostly observant people. Holidays, observed the Sabbath, went to shul, kept kosher, most of them. There were grocery stores, restaurants. There was also a market. People used to put up stands to sell suits, shoes, all necessities for people's everyday life.
We went to school, came home with homework, had to practice the violin. We were lucky, you see. We had the season change. We have rain and snow. So what is the kid to do? You stay at the home, and what shall you do? You read a book. And that was a blessing.
We observed high holidays. I went to Hebrew school, would go to services, because I would see my friends there. We would light candles at Hanukkah, but other than that, we were very much assimilated.
All the theaters, dancing, movies. We had a lot of friends, and they all came to my mother's house. My mother's house was always open for everybody.
My dad worked as a salesman. He came home once a week. He left Monday and came back Friday. My mother took care of us. She was a good cook, good baker. She baked her own challah and little breads for Friday night. She made a chicken soup. In 1933, Hitler came to power, and when I went to school, they put me in the last row of the class because I was Jewish. After school, we could not play in the street because Jews were beaten up. We went to a big synagogue next to our house to make our homework, to play chess, to play ping pong, to do a little sport in the back of the temple, just not to be in the street. We couldn't go to parks. They started writing on the benches in 1935. They wrote on the benches, "Nicht für Juden," means not for Jews.
They burned books. As a child, I said, books for we learn from what's happening. Mad.
Berlin became a very clean, proper city for a few months in 1936. When the Olympic Games were played in Germany, all of a sudden from all the benches, from all the parks, the sign disappeared because there was a lot of people from all over the world coming. It was like nothing ever happened there. But it came back, the foreign people left, and everything was done again.
When Hitler was speaking, and I saw him on the balcony, they went me shaky when he came on the balcony. And after, when he went back, they were singing, "Nach Hause, nach Hause, nach Hause gehen wir nicht. Und wenn der Führer spricht." That's what they were singing. We don't go home until the Führer speaks, and if he speaks, we still don't go home. So I said to myself, what is happening here?
When Hitler came to power, he planted the fifth column, what they call it, you know. They had a lot of Volksdeutsch, what they call Germans born in Poland. This were the easiest people for him to organize. And they start walking around calling "Don't buy from Jews." This started about 1937, 36. And it was a problem. But actually in Poland there was always anti-Semitism, to be honest.
On November 9th, 1938, in the morning, all of a sudden, we went out to school and we saw smoke and fire. And they started to breaking the windows. There were a lot of Jewish stores, and they took out the merchandise, and they started burning the synagogues. And a week later, I'm supposed to have my bar mitzvah. We cannot make it in the temple because the temple was burned down and broken. There was a little house in the back from the Gabbai, the person who takes care of the temple. He says, you can do it in my house. Tell your family to come. In one corner were the burnt Torah scrolls. They were laying on the floor. I did my bracha, and I did what I have to do for my bar mitzvah. The rabbi was standing, crying. Told me never to forget.
The Germans entered in the morning, September 1st, crossed the border without declaring the war. But the night before, they bombarded all Polish airports. For this reason, not one Polish airplane could go up and fight the Germans.
I remember my mother waking us up and being in tears and said, the Germans have entered Holland and were at war. The fighting was over within days because the Germans just bombed and Holland capitulated.
The Germans were going to come into Paris. And when I saw the uniform, and when I saw that shade of gray-green, it frightened me, and I ran back to the house and I started to cry.
When Hitler began to persecute us and separate us and marked us with armbands and stars of David. And when this happened, I felt a great deal of rejection. And I can remember saying and thinking to myself, why was I born Jewish?
Racial laws almost immediately took effect. We were ordered to wear first yellow armbands, which later turned into the yellow star.
Once the German came in, everything changed overnight. Immediately loudspeakers and posters all over. Jews cannot work as doctors. Everybody who had office job, government job is out.
We couldn't go out too much on the street because they beat up the Jews all the time, and especially from the Hebrew school. When they saw us coming out or going in, and the word dirty Jew that was constantly screaming dirty Jew when they saw a Jew. I think it was the worst time because I was a young girl, 15-year-old, and I needed friends and needed to go out, not to stay in the house constantly.
The Germans announced that they needed 2,000 young men, and they needed them with college educations, preferably fluent in 2 out of 3 languages, Russian, Lithuanian, and German, and that these people would be given a chance to do easy work, research at universities and so on. And it sounded absolutely marvelous. So anybody who had any protectia, any pull, tried to get in those 2,000. And then the day came and they marched out the best and the brightest we had. And they took them to a place called the 9th Fort, which was about 10 miles out of the city, an old World War I Russian fortress. And this is where they were killing people. They were bringing in people there from Lithuania, but also from Germany and from France and from all over the place. And it wasn't anything sophisticated, just machine guns and bulldozers and so on. So they killed the 2,000. They were never seen again.
The Warsaw Ghetto was formed, and they started putting people from all over. And we were told, we're going to move to the Warsaw Ghetto. This was beginning of 1940. The Judenrat told us to put in everything in suitcases. You couldn't take any furniture. You could only take what you could carry. They took us into this post office where the SS was staying. They took everything away, beat the hell out of us, and told us to go. When we came into the Warsaw Ghetto, you saw already people dying in the street. It was not a nice picture, you know. If you put 500,000 people in a ghetto and you don't give them... People that went to work, they took commandos. They called a commando. They took 200 people. They marched them out so at least they got food where they worked on the airfield, building airfields, unloading train loads, you know, with ammunition, all kind of things. And the people that were in the ghetto, what can you do? Yeah, there's no work. The only rations they gave you, even a child couldn't survive.
When the German occupied us, it was on a Passover evening. We were sitting around the table and my father was praying, blessing the wine, and the Germans were knocking at the window, shouting, "Verfluchte Jude," and we just lowered our voices. We blew out the candles and we knew this is the beginning of the hell. We were ordered to get our belongings as little as possible and leave our homes. I thought, God, I wish I was a bird flying there, because the bird was free, but I wasn't.
They announced that all of the gold and silver and valuables and furs and radios, watches, clocks, all that had to be delivered within 72 hours. And they apparently felt that they weren't getting enough. So they decided to show us that they were serious about it. And what they did was they sent armed patrols to every corner house on every street. And out of every corner house, they took 2 men at random, shot them, and just let them lie there. And we happened to live on a corner at that time. So they came to our house, they took out my grandfather and one of my uncles, and we heard shots, and we came out, and there were the 2 dead bodies. From a point of view of a kid, it was very boring. The adults would go to work. The kids would stay behind. There was really nothing for us to do. From time to time, there were actions when they would come and search through the ghetto, and they would take people out. They came in, burned down the hospital that we had a couple of times. But in between the actions, which were totally unpredictable, as a kid, it was really very boring. You had to find things to do because days were long. And we played a lot of soccer. You know, you would go out on the field and try and pick up a team, and I'd say, "Hey, where's Joey?" And somebody would say, "Oh, Joey, didn't you know they took him away last Wednesday?" And I'd say, "Oh, yeah, what a shame. You know, he was a good center forward. Now we have to find somebody else."
When my sister was taken from Paris, they were taken to Liver. They had something like 20,000 people in this hippodrome for 5 days without sanitation, without food, without anything. My sister was very beautiful, Sabine, and there was a young man who was a guard that obviously fell in love with her. And through him, she was able to smuggle out a couple of letters. And one of the letters was that she just saw my brother's beautiful blonde hair being shaved, my brother Henri's hair shaved. My mother had beautiful black hair but wavy, shaved, and Sabine's hair was shaved. And in the letter, you could actually see the tears falling down, and that they had been put in prisoner's uniform. And this young man asked if he could marry my sister. She was only 15. And yes, it's true. You get her out of that camp, you have my blessings, you can marry her. By the time he went back to PTVA to get her, she was on her way to Auschwitz.
There was a letter smuggled from Poland
And this letter said there is something terrible going on in Poland. They are building a camp in a small town called Auschwitz. And we have the feeling something is built there that will help them to execute Jews in large amounts.
I don't know how many people there were, but we were packed in like herrings practically. It was just suffocating, hot, smelly. You had your bathroom right there. You didn't go out. They didn't ever open the doors. It took a total of 3 days and 2 nights. And if somebody was screaming that somebody died or something, and they still didn't open the doors. So it was just a horrible trip that I want to forget. I can't. I don't want to forget, but I want to forget.
There came trucks, and they start throwing in bread into the trucks. And whoever grabbed the bread, if you're lucky, you were hiding it, you could save it. There was a father and a son next to me, and the father got a hold of a bread. And the son was about my age. He was still a little bit stronger than the father. And he wanted the bread from the father. So he was trying to grab the bread, but the father didn't want to give away the bread. You would think a father would share with the son. And the son kept on hitting the father so hard till he killed the father so he can take the bread away from the father.
I had just turned 18, and I was looking out how free the world is.
My father was an extremely smart man. I thought to him in the terror I was sitting there, I thought, Daddy, what's going to happen? I told him, after all, And he always assured me, don't worry. This is the 20th century. They're not going to kill us.
After 3 days and 3 nights, the door opened up, Raus! 4 o'clock in the morning, Birkenau, the ramp. Raus, so schnell wie möglich, raus! At that moment, we thought we were in hell.
Thousands of people were pouring out of this train. The train had no end. I couldn't see the end of it. And there was tremendous chaos. Children looking for parents and mothers calling their children's names. It was impossible to find anybody.
I was holding on to my mother's hand, and we were walking together. She was carrying my brother. Suddenly, a whip came down on my hand. I was pulled away from my mother, and she was shoved in a different direction. I started screaming, I want my mother. I want to go with my mother.
There was one person, looked like a ranked German with high rank, and he was telling you go to this side, you go to this side, and so on. And later on, we found out the left side meant, or one side meant life, the other side meant the death camp.
I see my grandfather standing there from far away. And I said, Opa. And he hit me. Helmut. He didn't think I was coming with him. He said, Helmut, wo bist du? Wo, Helmut? I got near to him. I put my arms around him. I pressed him against me. I said, Opa, I'm here. He said, Helmut. Meine Helmut. He was a man. He must have weighed 45 kilos. That moment of strength, what I gave to him, was for me the biggest satisfaction of my life.
We were taken into an underground dressing room, and here, surrounded by Nazi soldiers and vicious dogs that were growling and barking at us, we were told we should get undressed, we're going to take a shower. And of course, nobody moved. So one of the soldiers walked over to one of these women and hit her and said, "Take it off." We came out naked on the other side of the shower room and stood there wet, naked, from mid-afternoon till about midnight. I remember my sister and I hugging each other for a little body wound. We were freezing. And then at midnight, they took us into this barrack where they shaved our heads, our bodies. They sprayed us with DDT, with pesticide. And then we walked through a door where two prisoners greeted us. One gave us a recycled dress, and another prisoner had a bucket of yellow paint and a brush about 4 inches wide and painted a yellow streak from the top of our shaved head down through our back. This was the identification of being a Jewish prisoner.
They pressed the number into my left arm. At that moment, when you get that pressed into you, your dignity, you felt so undignified, you felt so unpractical. In that moment, I felt I was nobody anymore. Because he said to us afterwards, now this is, when you asked your name, this is your number.
We were introduced to this overseer who was a capo. You know, all the overseers were called capos in the camp. She was a Jewish Slovakian girl. And I asked this capo, when are we going to be reunited with our parents? And she pointed to one of the chimneys of the crematorium, and she said, "Do you see this chimney?" I said, "Yes." She says, "There go your parents. And when you'll go through the chimneys, you'll be reunited."
I looked up to the sky. I saw the stars. And I counted each star, one of my family. I said, this is my Opa, this is my Oma, this is my sister.
One of the Polish girls in the barrack started to sing Yiddish. And she was singing the song, My Yiddish Mama. And I remember we all cried through the whole night.
Jüdische Mama, es gibt nicht besser in der Welt. Jüdische Mama, wie bitter wenn die fällt. Wie schön und lichtig ist ein Haus, wenn die Mama ist du. Wie traurig finster Wind, wenn Gott nimmt dich voll am Kabut. Jüdische Mama, jüdische Mama, Mama, oi
Arbeit macht frei. Work makes free. And the interesting thing, the first thing I saw was there was entrance. I never saw a sign which said exit.
Either it was very hot that you were faint, or it was bitter cold. And we didn't have, so we would hold on to each other and our bodies one would warm the other.
We were jammed in. We could sleep never. We could never sleep. But we constantly fought to just stretch a little bit an arm or a leg because we couldn't move.
When we woke up 4 o'clock, there was always, they selected a few to go pick up the food for us. We were getting like a soup. It's a little watery, with some grass in it. You could feel the sand under it.
We'd go to work 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. I think we got either a piece of bread in the morning and a bowl of soup when we came back from work. And we worked 12 hours. And we just slept on bare wood. There was no blankets or pillows or anything. And there was no sanitary, there was no water, there was no soap. You were allowed to go wash up once a day, and that was it.
Before you went to sleep, they used to dig holes outside. You wake up in the morning, the holes was filled up. They used to kill people at night. They used to take them out for nothing. You see a lot of people, I was young, so I could take it. A lot of people, they was older, they was in the camps. He couldn't walk no more to work. They don't need you there. They shot you for nothing.
When you woke up in the morning, you had to stand outside. For hours, it seemed like for hours, they were counting. Counting. And finally the tally was added up. Then they reported to a higher rank German that all is accounted for. But this took hours of counting, and freezing cold, or very hot. They just didn't care.
Guards were drunk all the time. Guards couldn't count, which means you had to stand for hours and hours and hours because they were too stupid to count. They played Russian roulette there, not with a gun. It would have been too simple. They lined you up for that famous appel to be counted. And then one of the guards, who had perhaps a bad night or no night at all, would say, every second, every fourth, out into the gas chambers.
They marched us in that big room. We had to get undressed completely naked. And then they took us in the room with the holes in the ceiling. See, when they gassed, they let Cyclone B gas through. They told us to sit on the floor. There was no window. The doors were closed. So we started to cough and to choke. And probably from lack of air, we dozed off. And then, I don't know how long we were in, but then they started yelling out, everybody out. What happened is really a miracle. That day, they had trouble with letting the gas through.
I didn't know the danger I was in, and I walked over a little bridge, and a man was standing on the door. Von der Sonne. Und er went in there and said, was ist das du? Sag, komm mal ran hier, sagt er, du bist hier in der Gaskammer. Sag ich, in der Gaskammer? I was at the back. Because they came in from the front, they went through to the hole where they had to put off their clothes, that I know now. They had to hang the clothes on the head hangers there. It says there you're going to take showers, sit down, take it easy. The SS was standing there taking kids on their arms. And then he said 10, 15 minutes, you hear them schreieing and shouting. And after 10, 15 minutes, he said, they open the door again, it's finished. Nobody. And then you see all the strong people on top and all the weak people on the bottom. And the strong ones on the top, he says, they have stomachs full of air or something. You see people that scratched on the walls because they want to get on top of each other. The last death fight, the fight against the death.
An SS came to our barrack holding up a violin, and he announced, whoever can play the violin to come to the front room. And I will give to the one who plays to my liking, I will give you food and water. The violin was given to the oldest one among us. And I have never in my life heard anyone ever so beautiful play. But the SS didn't like his playing. So he motioned the couple. One couple took the violin out of this wonderful violinist's hand. The other one picked up a heavy iron pipe and went from behind and smashed his head so hard that he broke his skull, and blood and brains splattered all over the floor. I tried to sneak back in the barrack, but yet a third couple grabbed me and forced me right in the middle of the floor, gave me the violin, and says, "Spiel." Play. Here, that's what came out of the instrument. But the SS held up his hand and started to beat the rhythm. Because I played the Blue Danube, it was in 3/4 time. So he was beating, and then he said, "Hold it." Now, from that time on, right there and then, I could play anything that I wanted. But here is a question. I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to believe. I have never played the Blue Danube in my life before. Never.
I saw sadism, cruelty from the Germans and anyone that had a higher rank, whether it was a prisoner himself, but he had to show to the Germans that I'm doing what you might want me to do, and so on. I saw a lot of cruelty. I never thought that people can handle people, other people like that.
My job was to go and pick up the dead and cart them up to the crematorium, where another group of Sonderkommandos would shove them in the oven. On one occasion, I picked up one of the men who was on the floor, and I hear a voice saying, "Oh, please give me water. Oh, please give me water." And I look around and see where it came from. Who said that? And the man, I noticed them. Well, this is the man I just picked up. Immediately, I went to the capo. I said, "Herr Capo, Mr. Capo, this man I just picked up and put him on the cart, he's not dead at all. In fact, if we would, he's asking for water, and if we would give him water and a little food, he could survive, and he could come to himself, and it would be very useful because he could go to work." So when we arrived to the crematorium, this couple forced me to be the one who shoves this man into the oven and burn him. And I had to comply with his wish, or else I'll be in it. Now, I have never lived that through. To these days, sometimes I wake up during the night screaming, and I'm seeing this man and hearing his cry. And I had to burn him.
They sang the Atikva in the gas chamber. And we heard it because that camp was not far from the crematoriums. And it was so cold. And it was so lonely. You could hear a pin fall, you know. And we heard them sing the Atikva.
The praying from crematorium, from the fire, it goes in you heard every time, Shema Yisrael, God, where are you? Where is the promises? Why? I'm a religious man. I believe in you. And this, you know, you never forget in your life.
It was the Passover of 1945. We might be liberated at any time, except the Germans don't allow camps to be liberated with inmates still in place. They usually either kill off the camp or they march them towards the inside of Germany. And we heard rumors of these so-called death marches, which really indeed were death marches. So we decided with my father that from that really, truly meager portion of bread that what we were receiving in the camp, every day we are going to slice off a tiny, tiny piece and we are going to save it up for the march. Now one day I came in from work and my father sat me down and said, now I hope that you will understand what I'm about to tell you. You won't like it, but you will understand it, I'm sure. I gave away all the bread we saved because a small new transport arrived to the camp. And I found out that one of the men somehow managed to smuggle in a prayer book, an old, small prayer book. He smuggled in. It was unbelievable. And I bought it. I gave him all the bread we saved up. I started to cry. A few days later, it happened to be Passover night. My father held a Seder because this little book contained the entire Haggadah. And I will never ever forget the scene. There were hundreds of inmates sitting on the bunks on the floor in silence, listening my father reading the Haggadah from the beginning. And I'm sure that this instilled some hope and courage and added a little extra strength to these people.
How can I forget Auschwitz, Majdanek, Bergen-Belsen, Theresienstadt, Buchenwald, Krakow, Krzanów, Warschau, Groß-Rosen, Babi-Yar, Ravensburg, Riga, Sachsenhausen, Blechhammer, Brande, Graditz, Faulburg, Langenbielau, Treblinka, and so many others. How can I forget Moishe, Yankel, and Rivka, Hans Gretchen, Michel, Robert, Henrik, and so many names. And I hear so many Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. How can I forget the sound of shovels in the wind that carries the endless sound of Yiskadal v'Yiskadash Shemei Rabbah? It is so much pain to remember, so much pain, but it's so hard to forget.
The Germans asked us to start digging our graves. And they told us, you dirty Jews, you're not going to escape. We're going to shoot you before we leave. And so we dug our graves, and every day we weren't sure when will be our last day. And one day we went to sleep, and the next morning we got up, and there was no wake-up call. And we went up, and there were no Germans around. And it was a beautiful day. We realized that the guards had left. The gates were locked and they were electrified. So we started to dig a ditch under the gate. And since I was the youngest, I got out first. It was a beautiful day, and birds were chirping and the flowers were out. And to walk alone and not to have to walk in line with guards around us, it was some glorious feeling.
The German peasants started to seed potatoes, and they opened these potato heaps on the fields. We went there and stole what we could, putting it on our back in some textile, and always with these bags we marched through the streets. It was our greatest fortune.
I thought that if my parents didn't make it, I don't want to live. I didn't know how. Everything was being done for me until the war, and I just didn't know how. They took a bunch of young kids to camp. And when we were liberated, we were older, but we didn't learn anything from life. I mean, we didn't mature, grow up. You still felt like you were only 15 when you first got there.
We were weak, we were disoriented, everybody was running. I remember my mother looking for my father. Somebody said that there was, I don't know how she traveled there, she went to Prague. That there might be somebody who had seen perhaps my father, who knows of him, where, you know, of if he, I mean, it was crazy. Much sadness came, because the list of people were coming back and we were searching for our loved ones. And every time the names were so similar, it was so painful, the dates. And you looked and you looked and you looked and you went and you searched and you asked people, did you, in fact, know this one? Did you know that one? Somebody said that they saw my brother in Auschwitz and that he was shot because he wouldn't put my mother in the oven. If it's true, I hope he died. I hope it's true.
Mothers was looking for children, children for mothers, and fathers for wives and sisters.
I was looking for my family, looking for friends, and nobody survived.
When I came back to Germany after the war, I was going around just looking for trouble. A few boys like me, when still was healthy, and we took revenge. I used to knock the hell out of them. They used to call Juden schlagen, Jewish people are killing us. So you kill us too. Yeah, I take revenge a little bit for them. I used to tell them, this is for my mother, this is for my father, this is for my sister and brother. I used to give them the business.
The pain is real. The pain is not a fiction. I wish it were a fiction. I wish somebody would come back and give me back my family and say, hey, it never happened, here they are. But they aren't here.
We went over the border to Germany, the DP camp. And we registered in the DP camp and waiting to register to come to United States or to Australia or to Canada or to Israel, whatever comes first.
Wohin soll ich gehen? Wer kann entführen mir? Wohin soll ich gehen? Ist verschlossen jeden Tag. To the left, to the right, it's the same in every land.
In 1947, in December, when the United Nations declared that Israel will be a state, people that we lost everything. This was the most important thing that I was able to think about it, that I'll be in my own country. I'll be a soldier, I'll be somebody strong.
Wohin soll ich gehen? Ist verschlossen jedem Tier. Ist die Welt groß genug, zur Familie eng und klein. Wie ein Blick muss zurück, siehst du stört jede Brick, wie ein soll ich gehen.
12 million men, women and children have died murdered in cold blood. Millions upon millions more today mourn their fathers and their mothers, their husbands, their wives and their children. What rights has any man to mercy who has played a part, however indirectly, in such a crime?
50 years. I lived 50 years after that. Can anybody even believe that it'd be possible to live 50 more years with such awesomeness, with that knowledge?
I felt I had a life. Something owed me a life. I know planet Earth didn't owe me a living, but I wanted a life.
I thought if I marry an American, American roots, American family, American children, I'll be American. I will find roots.
I didn't want to live. I had guilty feelings. Why did I remain alive and not one of my brothers? Or not my younger brother, one immediately younger?
I go back to my childhood. I always search it. I search it because half of my body is always there. I think if the last Holocaust survivor dies and is not here anymore, all these people will find their rest and their peace. The 6 million, they will suddenly come to peace because they're not in peace yet. Because then they know, when we're not here anymore, that we have given the message. And the young people have to continue, but then they will find their rest.
I felt in my heart that any little thing that was done for me, and I don't mean materially or financially or anything, a kind word meant so much to me. They're nice to me. You must always be involved. Don't ignore it by thinking, well, this is the other guy and I cannot be involved. I would say you have to be involved. Because if not, God forbid, the same thing can happen again. No matter how wonderful the country, you only need a couple of people that start spreading rumors. And the whole darn thing can come tumbling worse than an earthquake.
Don't hate anybody. Just don't hate anybody, because look what happened from the hatred. Because somebody has a different religion or different race, or you shouldn't look at that. You should look for the person, the human being, what is inside.
I think the most important thing is we've learned that life is precious. And that's something that stays with you all the time.
I cheated Hitler and his henchmen, and this, what I got right now here, a lovely family, my wife and my kids, and this is the happiest moment of my life because I unloaded everything on tape. Maybe I'm not going to be so crazy anymore.
"50 years later, there is still so much that we can learn from the people who witnessed and lived through the Holocaust. Lessons about life and hope and the devastation that can come from intolerance. The interviews you've just seen are only a glimpse into the first testimonies collected by the survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation. Shoah is the Hebrew word for Holocaust. And this nonprofit foundation has been established to videotape tens of thousands of interviews with Holocaust survivors. Conducting interviews around the world, around the clock, in every language, the foundation is not only assembling an invaluable historical archive, it's using breakthrough computer technology to revolutionize how history and cultural tolerance can be taught and learned for generations to come. And long after the last survivors are gone, they'll still be able to speak with us, and we'll still be able to learn from them. The devastating events of the Holocaust didn't happen to faceless numbers. They happened to people just like the ones you've seen and heard from. Men and women and children with names and faces and families and dreams. People just like us. Listening to them, it's our hope that we can bring attention to the lessons of tolerance and understanding for now and for our future.
As one Holocaust survivor said, "I don't want to forget, but I want to forget." The incredible stories you just heard from the survivors of the Holocaust will help to ensure that we never forget. Chrysler Corporation is proud to be involved with the Shoah Foundation and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. We hope that generations to come will visit the museum and will view the works of the Shoah Foundation and keep the message of the Holocaust alive. All of us at Chrysler Corporation thank Steven Spielburg, the Shoah Foundation, and Turner Broadcasting for this meaningful and important program.